With your thoughts or reaction on the geopolitical situation, I think where you would start.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's great to be with you all again. And thank you for the positive note at the end. Indeed, we do need to think that things are going to be okay, and not only, but life is going to be great. That's really key, especially today. Now, with that in mind, it's something funny that you've said at the very beginning. When stuff is short, we can do geopolitics. And I would rephrase that just a bit, because I've done geopolitics for about more than, well, almost 20 years, let's put it that way. And stuff was not always short during the last 20 years. In fact, life, in Romania in particular, has been better and better during the last 20 years. Now, you might challenge that because you don't feel it. You didn't trust it was going to get better, which is a very soft kind of a word to use, right, for assessing the better, right? So I would put that in another way. I would say when stuff is short, everyone is obsessed with geopolitics, and therefore everyone is obsessed with a key ingredient of geopolitics, because geopolitics is actually about three elements: politics, economics, and conflict, or military action.
Yep.
And everyone is becoming obsessed with military action and with conflict when stuff is short. That's what we are actually talking about. That's when we think we know everything about how the world works. And yes, we do. On social media, everyone knows about that. There is no way out of any discussion about, kids, social life, a theater play, without you thinking about international conflicts, because there is an element that pointed to something that relates to what Trump was doing and whatever. So that kind of works for me in a way that I can tell what people understand of what I'm doing, sort of. But at the same time, it really annoys me, because geopolitics and, the theory, at least, should help us get to that point where diplomacy actually works. Not in the sense of WTO working, because that's not working, but understanding each other, making this work for all of us. So my takeaway from what you were saying is that it is quite funny that it is bad demographics that brought us here in the first place. What do I mean by that? Here in our region, it is bad demographics that has brought the conflict in Ukraine. And you may say, well, she's going insane now. She said she was doing geopolitics for the last 20 years, and what is she talking about? Well, thinking about what you've said and the numbers you were pointing to, there are three elements that basically drove Russia in the place that it is now. And yeah, well, we all know that Russia is the bad guy in the room, and we all kind of understand that there was an energy crisis, bingo, and that it was the energy strategy that Russia conducted with the Europeans and whatever, and something didn't work well, and therefore here we are with the conflict. No. It was the demographics in the first place. It was the bad demographics of Russia. It was the inability of structurally address the problems in the post-Soviet world in Russia that allowed, or not allowed, drove even the weird political regime in Moscow that had to use the only thing they had, which was the energy. And I'm not making up excuses for Russia, by the way, right now.
No, no.
But they used the energy sources because they couldn't build up on the demographic power because there was no demographic power. In the 90s, everyone wanted out, and everyone was depressed. They did not trust that life could get better in Russia. They only saw the bad things, and it got worse and worse and worse. And bottom line, energy was the only thing that the regime could use to trade with the exterior. And here we are in the early 2000s with a new president in the Kremlin who did what he knew best, trying to structurally assess what he could do with the little he had, and then using the energy as a tool to build up strategy in Europe and elsewhere, while demographics got worse and worse every moment. And then, we all know that when the Russian economy was traditionally weak in history, and the bad demographics came, it got aggressive. It is the fear that Russia would lose everything in terms of population and in terms of looking towards the West that Russia actually got aggressive towards Ukraine. It could not afford a pro-Western Ukraine because trust in the good, trust in the better life was winning. And the regime could not allow that to be told to its population. So, in a sense, it is a very simplistic way to put it. But in a sense, Russia used the bad demographics, and here I will switch. It is the Kremlin who used the bad demographics to stay in power, to maintain sort of a good stability, and get towards what it could reach in terms of stability and the buffer. And yes, it is also about energy, and yes, it is also about bridging to Europe and the West. Yes, it is also about saying it is all a successful story at the end of the day, framing it as a victory against the West. But bottom line, the whole conflict situation that we are in right now, and Russia getting aggressive, I think, is because of loss in trust in the better life. And with that, democracy also went down.
There's a very interesting question that just came up, that regarding deteriorating demographics of Russia, does that mean more wars in the future? Because, you know, the global outlook is kind of grim on that respect?
Well, the easy question is no, if we actually take that advice. And if we actually tell our kids that it is a better life that they are going to live and show how that is being lived. Now, currently we are in a destructuring phase. So currently everything seems grim. We are not in a restructuring phase, because a restructuring phase would mean we know where we are heading. And right now, we do not know where we are heading. I mean, yes, there is a logic to tariffs, and that logic is basically get to the table and let's talk about it. But beyond the let's talk about it, we do not know any logic to come. We do not know any purpose, any goals to come from that. So it is that end of the destructuring that is going to resettle or reset the world we live in.
Like it happened with Reagan. At the end of Reagan-Thatcher, there was a direction, which is, by the way, the global era of markets that we lived for the 35 years. They were set by them. By the way, just one little memory. At that time, we said Reagan is crazy. How can an actor from California be president? I just want to say, in 30 years, it might all be good.
He would be a great option right now.
Yeah. And one other thing that came off of that, we didn't always live in a period of non-tariffs.
No.
I mean, tariffs was the way to know, and it was more open. And you pointed that out. In a non-tariffary trade, you have more hidden ways to
Do it.
to do it. In a tariff trade world, economics
Drive it. Yep.
drive it. So there is nothing really scary about tariffs. If you think about, they can be negotiated, and it's a number, and you can put it out there.
Yep.
And the history of economics also shows it. It's, barriers, protectionism, and then comes back to an era where you have more or less global trade, more or less.
Yep.
We never really have had full globalization.
Exactly.
What's scary now is that we have so much information that we think our world is trembling, is fracturing, is going to directions that we do not know how to handle, basically.
And a lot of misinformation.
Yep.
Of course. And because of that, we are trembling ourselves because we don't know what to do with it. Now, it is our choice if we get into a conflict or not, and it is also the place that we live in. And this comes from the theory and the basic geopolitics that I call. It's basically the urban and the non-urban that will set how many and where the conflicts are going to be. It's not the urban and the rural. By the way, in our world, in the urban world, we have the non-urban with us.
Exactly.
In the sense of people having just a very different life and very different values and very different environments that they live. And sometimes there are two groups that are very different from one another, and we have the polarization, and then we have the conflict.
And if I would like, yes, exactly, to pass the question to Ovidiu, I receive here. In Romania, there seems to be a lot of negative. When we ask people, how do you see the future? Usually the answer is, how do you explain that, and how do you believe this is something that can change?
Yeah. What's the opportunity?
I think it's difficult to explain it, to be honest, right? Because if I look at historical numbers, it would, the conclusion should be an optimistic one, right? I think like many of you, or all of you, I also want to be in Romania, and I want to, be successful and prosperous in Romania. Like many of you, probably I've also returned to Romania, making that super conscious decision to be in Romania long term. And if you look at what happened in Romania in the past a couple of decades, let's start maybe with demographics. So in the year 2000, we were around 23 million Romanians. In the year 2022, we were around 19 million. So we lost 4 million Romanians in the past 2 decades. Now, if you extrapolate this decline, and you also take into account the 1.5 birth rate that we have in Romania, still better than the 1.2, but by quite far away from the 2.1 that would ensure at least stability, you arrive in the year 2040 with a population of around 16 million Romanians, right? That's losing 30% of the population within less than half a century. So that is indeed worrying. The other thing that is less worrying but also noteworthy is the fact that also Romania's population has become much older. So in the year 2000, the average age was around 34 years. Quite recently, it's closer to 44 years, right? So it's around 10 years age growth within the past 2 decades. And this trend will continue also in the future. So from a demographic point of view, numbers are not extremely positive. But if you look at the economic point of view, if you look at Romania's economic development since joining the European Union, we doubled our GDP in the last 10 years. We started in 2007 when we joined the European Union. The GDP per capita of Romania compared to Europe on average was 50%. right? So a Romanian was half as rich or twice as poor as your average European. Now this gap halved in this past 15 years, right? So the gap is now only 25%. And we have quite a few scenarios that we've developed looking at the Romanian economy in the next decades. And we expect this gap to completely close by 2040. Romania grew on average 3.4% real GDP in the past 17 years versus Europe, which grew at around 0.8, right? Now, if we don't need to keep the 3.4, even if we grow at around 2%, assuming Europe will stabilize at around 1%, we will completely have covered this gap, this historic gap that we've had, and the Romanian will be as rich as your average European, right? Which is, I think, an objective that we should all embrace. So looking at, to go back to your question, Sotiris, looking back at the financial evolution in Romania, it's difficult for me to understand the negativism and the skepticism of a significant part of society. Now, of course, COVID has hit us hard. Your average consumption bucket, if you look at 2019 versus 2025, right, so 6 years, prices for the end consumer have grown by 40%. Those prices grew significantly more than wages have increased in the same time. So yes, I understand the fact that disposable income has shrunk. I understand that we had, very big inflation in the past years. Still, there are plenty of reasons to remain positive and optimistic for Romania in general. And there's a few things, right, that I believe will or continue to position Romania in quite a unique way. One is energy. And I think we do have, and we have Alessio coming in the next panel to also elaborate that more, but I think Romania has a huge potential in energy, and I'll elaborate about that a bit later. The other one is tech, and I think Dan Oros will also speak about that later in the panel, but Romania is already close to 10% of GDP coming from IT and tech. The third point is defense. We've all heard the news of Ursula von der Leyen announcing 800 billion euro spending in defense, doubling the current share of GDP at European level. A lot of that will be to the benefit of Romania, be it in terms of equipment or in terms of actual basis, which from economic point of view is an opportunity for Romania.
Let me bring that one a bit more alive. So if you want to build boats, you go to Romania. If you want to build tanks, you go to Romania. If you want to put anything together that is steel, that needs welding, actually the vast majority of the welders in Europe are in Romania. It's all upside. Build the crafts. We need lots of crafts. The robots will not do the welding fast enough. And there are lots of these example pockets. But I know lots of shipbuilders in the Netherlands who are actually very good at it. And then when we say this is the ship we want to build, the only place we can go is to Romania. That's why one of the shipbuilders actually owns a bit of the infrastructure in Romania. Just imagine that there are skill sets that Romania has, could also be in tech, could be in other places, but it's down to this specificity. When you get 3.5% more defense spending in Europe, it's going to rain demand on metal. We need steel. We need energy. I think all of that you could be doing. And you have a harbor, which is also very good because it means that your landed cost of all kinds of stuff is going to be cheaper than people that also need to do land transport. You have the Danube on which you can transport stuff. Do not underestimate how big that is. If at least Turkey lets you go in and the Russians don't shoot at you, that's important. But the reality is you might have a very unique position that you could play with in what is going to rain money. I mean, just imagine 3.5% defense, 1.5% infrastructure, on 20 trillion. That's the GDP of Europe. That's $1 trillion a year. It's going to rain money. Go catch it. Not with an umbrella, but the other way around.
And indeed, yes, we do expect a capital flow from the west to the east, where this is most relevant. The other point where I'm actually debating with fellow CEOs is agriculture. Some people are of the opinion that agriculture is not a hugely value-adding activity, so we should not focus on it. My perspective is that in light of the current geographical and geopolitical situation, Romania can actually capture the benefits, both in terms of productivity, of farming, but also in terms of processing. And I will close with one final remark. Yes, our macroeconomic situation is not great. Last year we had a 9% spending deficit or budget deficit. That's around 35 billion euros. That's unprecedented, at least in the last 2 decades. This hasn't been ever as big. The last time I remember we had such an important deficit was during 2008, 2009, where we did have a financing issue and access to capital issue, which now at much higher costs, but I don't think is that significant of an issue. So we have this huge budget deficit that we need to solve. We do expect seeing efforts from the public sector to both increase collection, that means higher taxes. Now, the new elected president wrote down that there will be no VAT increase. Let's see what other sources of tax collection will be proposed on both companies and individuals. And the other one is to reduce spending. So we do expect measures to reduce spending. I just hope that those measures will focus on reducing spending on things that didn't make sense, like partly subsidizing energy for people who actually can afford the full energy costs, versus cutting spending on things that we actually do need, which is everything related to infrastructure, be it roads, hospitals, schools, and so on and so forth.
Sorry, more question in the audience, or?
Let me do that after Antonio. I would like to...
I have a reaction to what you said, and both of you actually. So, geopolitically, we are now in a very opportunistic moment in history in Romania.
Exactly.
We are not only facing the conflict, which is the bad side of things, right? But in every conflict, there is an opportunity. The Black Sea region is actually the node, the geopolitical node, that links Europe to Asia. And besides the middle corridor, which is an opportunity in itself, linking Europe to the Asian markets on land and by sea through the Black Sea, there is also the opportunity of using, finally, the Danube. So I know that we have been saying that for a number of years, and the argument has been, well, wait a minute, there is something called the Danube Commission, where Russia is a member. Geopolitically, that's not really important, and that's not really possible because, Russia being a member is important. Well, yes, Russia is no longer a member starting January 2024. And that allows us to actually plan strategically on investing in the lower Danube, which basically means helping the Black Sea connector to the North Sea through Germany. And that is on the planning documents for both military and economic strategists right now. And that is important for both economics and for the so-called dual-use industries that will likely be very much in, let's say, in the growth, especially in this area, because we have the engineers. We not only have the welders, we also have the engineers. Talking about human resources, we are referring to humans as human resources now. We no longer have the human force. We no longer have the human capital. And it is in this part of the world that humans are actually resourceful in the sense of development, in the sense of emerging economies. So I believe that, of course, it is up to, a lot of government policies, but I would say that it is up to people in this room and outside of this room that actually do business to seek opportunities, to see what is out there, and to make use of this dual use of the Danube, of the idea of going into the Black Sea and beyond, into Central Asia and so on, because this is a real opportunity for our region right now.
Great.
And for the country, if I may, combining some points that I have received, there is lack of trust because from the people towards politicians, and that's a big issue in the country. And for everything that you said, and I believe that we all agree 100%, the main thing is to have a national strategy. If there's no national strategy, which is a long-term one, it is almost impossible, because then it's like you're shooting here and there and nothing really happens. These things take time to educate the workforce, to go towards a different specific direction, etc., etc. And unfortunately, this combined with a lack of trust creates a problem. Sven?
I'm not 100% sure. If you look at the development of China, all the development was, if you love somebody, set them free. Started in Shenzhen, you can do whatever you want, then bigger, then Shanghai, then da-da-da-da. And I actually believe that's what we're doing wrong in Europe. If you loved Romania, you would free the Danube. Yeah, I'm not kidding. It's because the reality is we're blocked by permitting. We're not blocked by vision. You think that if you let the Romanians loose, they will not build the ships? They will build the ships, but now I need a permit for another wharf. In 10 years, or I need a permit for a nuclear site, or I need a permit. We are completely stuck in permitting. If the permits in the world would basically all go in 1 week on very clear rules, trust in government would go like this. And you can build, and there's no. I understand you don't want a nuclear site, above this roof or something. I understand that, but there's enough space. I'm not 100% sure. Actually, state planning of the future, I don't believe in. We couldn't do it in agriculture. We are doing it massively wrong in energy. Who knows why Spain's thing got a blackout? They were celebrating 100% solar. When you're 100% solar, you turn down the gas turbines and so on. And it's the turbines that keep the grid stable. You get a shock, and that's called state planning of energy. Let's go 100% green and forget about how the system works. And I am, if I'm really honest, I'd rather, less involvement, all the development. You can trace all the development of China to setting people free. So whenever the government retreated, China blossomed. And whenever it crunched down, which it did with the tech entrepreneurs a while ago, it completely shrank. Mm-hmm. People are afraid of the government. You want them to say, so I like the Sting song, if you love somebody, set them free.
It's a beautiful policy.
If you love Romania, set yourself free.
Yeah.
And if I may add, national strategy, when I hear that word, and I think some may also have that same feeling that I have, I'm thinking about documents. We don't need more documents in this country. Exactly. We have enough documents and papers spent on ideas. Let's have ideas into practice. I'm not saying not talk about the great visions that we are having, not discuss with the politics, not try to with the politicians, not try to reach a better level of trust, which is essential and I think is urgent, because if anything in this country, we need that dialogue, we need that political debate, and we need that urgently, because we have about 3.5 years until the next elections. Yes, it's not 5, it's 3.5 years, because we have the parliamentary elections before the presidential elections coming up. So yes, we do need that part, but we also need the very, let the vision guide our business and the pressure from the business on the government and the politicians, because that's also building up trust of the human resources we work with in business.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What else coming in, or should we do a microphone in the room, or how you want to do it?
Yeah, maybe we could give the microphone. I mean, there are questions about the outcome of the Ukrainian war and how each outcome would affect us here in Romania. But I think this is a scenario discussion which I'm not sure whether it would.
Plus, how much time do you have for that? Because we could go in scenarios
Yeah, exactly.
and scenarios and scenarios, and
That's right.
we can even have the
In the fog
AI
of war,
help us with scenarios.
In the fog of war, let it play out. But why don't we ask somebody in the room?
Let me ask a question that actually came, a couple of questions like that came in the beginning, right after your speech. How many people can we sustain on Earth?
20 billion, no problem, but we're not going to get there. I mean, just to be clear, if all people of the world would stand upright next to each other, it's not comfortable, like in a metro, they all can fit on Manhattan. The world, by all measures, is completely empty. Yeah? We're just, I do a lot of speeches on growth. I like growth, I love growth, we should have more, we need to get rich, all good. The only places I get people to be concerned about is Western Europe, which is pretty dense, coastal Japan, coastal China even, and coastal US. Everybody else said, can we get rich first? In Africa they say, could we get food first? Africa is completely empty. It's as empty as you can imagine. If Africa would develop agriculture, they could feed the entire world twice. We're not short, we're actually at this moment giving land back to society because agricultural productivity is outstripping increased demand. We are so framed. Read books like The Rational Optimist. Read books about people that actually are studying our progress. Do you know that the planet is greening? Just Google. Planet is greening as a consequence of carbon dioxide, which is a fertilizer. We have more trees now than we had 5 to 10 years ago. Yeah, the world is greening. And so we are so poised by people who tell you a story that has nothing to do with the actual reality. That you just need to take the shackles off. There are no limits to growth. You can do smart growth, you can do stupid growth. Yeah, sure. And you can do it dirty, you can do it clean. Of course you should do clean.
I have another question. I have an interesting question. In business, our colleague says we have very high-profile advisors such as McKinsey to help us see the bigger picture. Who guides at such a level our president and the government? I would say not the government, but a government in Romania. Would you have an answer to that?
Could you repeat the question?
No,
In
whether the
business-
government has advisors that businesses people also have. I'll give a quick answer. It's not that complicated. I actually don't blame government for that they don't know what maybe we should be doing. They're stuck in a political reality which is full of luxury beliefs, elite capture, news capture, and God knows what. And so they're stuck in a system. If you take Europe, which did many good things with the single market, Brussels only has one tool, which is regulation. Guess what? That's the only tool they use. So we get more regulation, because that's the only way they can get stuff done. Now, they now have said, let's take 30% out. It's very hard for that system to do that. But I think government is not listening to people. They are just trying to figure out, can we break the system to get there? So, for example, in Europe, we once proposed that Europe should create a 28 country in which there's freedom. Let me give you an example. So if you're a fintech and you launch a bank, you actually need to connect to 160 banks in Europe. And these 160 banks each have the same IBAN number, but they have a different API. So you have to code 160 times. If you go to the US, you code once. So we said, why don't we create a 28 country in which there's one banking API? Von der Leyen actually has repeated this 28 country idea where the coalition of the willing can be set free, which is a bit the Shenzhen of Europe. I really think the issue is I'm not in the camp that the politicians are of lower competence or somehow than business, or they don't get good advice. They're stuck in a political reality which is dominated by news, which is largely negative and biased, and so on. And all these biases lead to a system that we need to unshackle the system. And why you sometimes get a populist or something else that tries to break through is because basically the people don't get what they need from the system. And then they try to shake it and hope that in that context the politicians can do something. I think they're trapped, and we are as a result. So I think we need to also, as business, don't go the politicians and us or versus us. I actually think we live in a political economy, and we need to engage. Mm-hmm. And the best advice is not about you're stupid or we're stupid or you're wrong or we're right. I actually think where the world will go, and Trump gives some example of that, is deal-based, bilateral, specific projects. So the gigafactory in Berlin has different regulation than the truck factory of Volkswagen next door. The semiconductor fab east of Dresden is built with different labor regulation than the rest of Germany. In my country, one of the main R&D sites is being doubled. In 7 weeks, we got together with the government to basically spend 6 billion in 2 years to basically double an R&D site by 10,000 people, housing, electricity, power, roads, infrastructure, trains, everything. They will all go there and we will all do it in 2 years. If you get everybody in one spot, so if you decide 10 kilometers from there will be the nuclear site, you bring everybody in one room that can do it there. I have no idea what 10 kilometers out there, but let's assume there's space there. Put everybody in the room and make a deal. But bring the top people in the room, the top people of the energy companies, the top people of the country, and just build it. And I think all of that is very possible, but you have to lift it from the process in the detail, because that's where it gets stuck. And I would suggest you all to say, invent the 10 Dresden sites, the gigafactory ideas of Romania, and just put everybody that needs to make that decision together and get it done. You'll get approval in Europe, you'll get approval and so on. But it has to be specific. What we often do in business is say, you guys don't understand, why don't you deregulate and it'll all be good. They don't know what to deregulate. Whereas if you say, I'm going to build the largest car factory in the world, the gigafactory in Berlin, or the second largest or something like that. I need this, could you help? People like to be opening the door of the largest of something. So build the rockets, build the robots, build the energy plants, and say where you're going to do it and make the deal. And then you might be disappointed that they don't do it. But the reality is, start with something concrete rather than some esoteric debate between they don't understand and we are the righteous ones. That's not true.
And as somebody proposes here, maybe into our next meeting with you guys, we should invite the president.
Absolutely.
To be here. We have another 6 minutes, so let's have a closing, let's say, statement. Would you like to start?
I can certainly do that. But before I do that, I have to react. The KPI of the politician is the vote.
Exactly.
And the us versus them is not good, because it is us personally, individuals, versus the politician. I know that in every vote, we have a winner and a loser, obviously, because that's how politics work. And the idea, the platforms, the communication that is going on from the politician is a response to what works for us. In the case of Romania, and in the case of many European countries, that was, I'm not happy with the government. Therefore, you should say that you are not happy with how things are, and you should start engaging me on that idea. And that is actually destructive. Are we thinking about the destructuring of the global system, the global economic system? That's where it comes from. It is the destructuring of the system that we order as voters.
Yep.
It is basically us calling for the populists, and it is us calling for solutions to elements that we see in a negative way. Now, for Ukraine, because you've asked about Ukraine, and I don't want to go away from that, because I know it's on everyone's mind, but it is a matter of what we are doing with the human resources, because no matter how this conflict ends, and when, and whether there will be a ceasefire, and what kind of ceasefire will that be, and that is an entire lecture that we can have on the topic, of course, we are going to have to deal with the reconstruction process that is not just investment and opportunities from the business side. It is also reconstructing a society and humans that have helped to deal with for the last 3 years and probably more with conflict, real conflict, human lives being lost, and people that were trained as teenagers to shoot. And that is going to be a transformation that we are going to have to deal with at the borders. Meaning security, when we are talking about human security and when we are talking about civic responsibilities, when we are talking about energy security, economic security, it all ties to what exactly does that mean in the build-up process of that society, which is right next door. It is going to affect us first and then the other European countries later. It is also going to give us the good opportunities, which is my closing remark. So the good opportunity that actually are coming from this conflict are something that we should all think about, also in terms of dealing with the political agenda of the politicians today. I mean, public administration, the deconstruction, how much of the deconstruction do we want? How much of the negativity do we want out there? What kind of a working government do we want? Because it is us asking and us having the mentality of asking for a change that might, at the end of the day, not necessarily be a good one if that means a complete destruction of the system. So let's be careful what we want, and let's make sure that we get the opportunities. That's my closing remark.
Thank you so much.
So when we were preparing for this panel, we had a prep meeting with Sotiris, and he, after we shared our ideas, Sotiris was like, okay, we cannot let people go away depressed from this meeting, so let's make sure we're optimistic. And Ovi, it's your responsibility to bring optimism to the room. So I'm taking that responsibility to heart because it's 100% genuine. Yes, I am trying to be a realistic optimist. Yes, I do believe the next 2-3 years will be difficult. But if I look back at COVID, if I look back at the financial crisis of 2009, 2010, if I look at what happened in the early 2000s and then in the 90s with Caritas and with Mineriade and so on and so forth, and you look at that constant evolution of Romania and you look at where we are today, I think that's something really to be proud of. And looking ahead, I think there are significant opportunities for Romania. Just thinking about energy, I think we are in a super privileged position of being fairly green and low carbon in terms of our energy mix. There's plenty of additional capacities to be brought to the market, including nuclear, including further solar, including further renewables in general. And let's please remember that we have Neptune Deep, which is supposed to be live in 2027, which will make Romania the biggest gas producer in the European Union. And Norway is excluded, they're not part of the European Union, yeah? But in the European Union, Romania will be the largest producer of gas. Not to mention the defense point that we also made, that also the tech point, which has doubled in the last 5 years, and we expect it to double again by 2030. So I think there are plenty of reasons to be optimistic and to believe in this a great country and great society.
Thank you, Vidu. Sven, would you like to add something?
So I think a country has only the right for 2 or 3 words when it brands itself. So if Romania would just say we have the welders and we have the gas, you're going to be pretty good, I think. Everything else will sort it. Dubai is everything is possible. But I think we need to also have a rallying cry for Europe. And if you allow me 1 minute still, I'm going to do it the way Trump would do it. I'm going to stand up for this, okay?
You need
Unless
music?
you want the break, but I'm just going to do the...
No, you don't need music, it's okay.
No, so it's like this. So, friends, there's a big country in the East. I don't mean a small country, I mean a really big country. It's called Russia, 140 million people. It goes all the way to Kamchatka, the Bering Strait, and they're dangerous. They're very dangerous. We need a big army. I don't mean small, I mean big. Not 10,000 people, not 100,000 people, but millions of people. Thousands, 10,000, 100,000 of tanks, big, beautiful tanks, drones. They need to fly. It's unbelievable what they can do. You know, we need that army. You know where the army will be? Poland, Romania, Hungary. Yeah, there will be technology from the West, but that's it. Now, then the other thing is Europe is the most beautiful place in the world. Best food, best history, best buildings, beautiful, great, unbelievable. There's about 1 billion people in the south that would like to walk over, swim over, crawl over, be there tomorrow. 1 billion is too much. We can have 10 million, maybe 5, maybe 50, but not 1 billion. So we need a coast guard, not a small coast guard, lots of boats, shiny boats, big boats. Who will do the boats? The Turks, the Greeks, the Southern Italians, the French, the Spanish, and the Portuguese. Now, you like money. I like money. I like lots of money. Do you like lots of money? No, there's a thing that they do in the US. It's a strange thing. The economists call it an earned income tax credit. It's a very odd word, you know, stupid. But you know what it is? They pay you taxes. You don't pay taxes. The government pays you taxes. How does that work? The first 10,000 euros, you get 10,000. The second 10,000, you get 7,500. All the way up to 80,000 euros worth of income. You don't pay taxes, you get taxes. When do you get the taxes? You get them on January 1st. What is January 1st? We look at the last year. If you made 80,000, you get the top up, you pay your tax. You get 40, you get a different. That's what it is. That's why you want to work, you're going to get lots of money. Who's going to pay you the money? You think that's your dinky toy government in Romania or the Netherlands or Denmark? No, it's going to be the only government that can pay it. It's the ECB, the European Central Bank. They're going to pay it. Then you want your money to be safe. You want lots of money, but it should be safe. No, nobody should be able to steal it. The bank can't go bankrupt. That can't be your small bank in the Netherlands. Or Italy, you know, they fell over. In Greece, they fell over. So the only one that guarantees the bank is called the ECB. We do need a capital market union for it, but we don't need to tell you. Because all the technical stuff that the bureaucrats always tell, nobody understands. So back to Trump. The ECB is going to guarantee you money. And then we need energy. We need lots of energy. We need cheap energy. You know what the beautiful thing is? Europe is the second biggest buyer of energy. It's going to be the same with the vaccines. America first, Europe second. In energy, it's going to be China first, Europe second. We built the infrastructure, LNG terminals everywhere. We drill, we build the nuclear, we buy the uranium, and we are the largest buyer. If Texas doesn't sell, Pennsylvania will sell. If Pennsylvania doesn't sell, Qatar will sell. You think the biggest buyer can't get cheap energy? You're wrong. Europe needs a big army in the east, a coast guard in the south. We will keep your money safe, and you'll get your taxes paid by the government rather than the other way around. We need cheap energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Break.
So we take a break for 45 minutes, and I would like to invite my colleague Julia. You want to say something, I think? You want to say something, so now is your turn.
If I need to say something, of course I will say something. Although after this discussion, I was thinking that maybe earlier I should have said, hi, I'm Julia, I have 3 kids, and I'm very optimistic about the future. So, I will tell you about the very beautiful things that our partners prepared for you outside, and I will be very quick on that. So at Affidea stand, you will be offered a quick and easy health check through rapid testing. Wellington is bringing in a full wellness experience. Check it out outside. SkinMed is on site with a professional dermatologist offering free dermatoscopy screenings. Artesana, they also have generously filled the fridge with their delicious dairy products. And finally, during the break, we'll have a raffle where CEJA Infrastructure will offer 3 vouchers. The winners will get an email with all the details. Thank you.